Welcome to Bouquets virtual program. I'm Caroline Melhop, Director of Institutional Partnerships and Events and part of the Como Friends team that produces Bouquets, this fabulous winter fundraiser for Como. Como Friends is the nonprofit partner to Como Park Zoo and Conservatory. Since 1999, we have raised and invested more than $48 million in this beloved community treasure. And that is thanks to many of you who made gifts of all sizes and in all ways. One way you can have an impact is making a gift to the Bouquets Fund a Mission. Your support will ensure that all of our visitors can come to Como, admission and barrier free. Your contributions elevate and enrich all of Como Park Zoo and Conservatory, from best-in-class care for our plants, gardens, and animals, to innovative education programs, and to conservation work here and across the globe. Thank you so much for joining us this evening in balmy tropical encounters. We're going to explore this living rainforest and Como's most diverse habitat. Here are curators Jeff Hall and Lisa Philander to tell you about some very exciting projects that will be happening in Tropical Encounters this year, thanks to donations from people like you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Hall, curator at Como Park Zoo. Welcome. It is a beautiful evening here in Tropical Encounters, which is a beautiful replica of a rainforest that you might find in Central and South America, complete with trees, herbaceous plants, and birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish. Really, it's a great way to showcase that animals and plants live together in nature, much like at Como Park Zoo and Conservatory. We work together in harmony to create wonderful exhibits like Tropical Encounters. Now, managing an exhibit like Tropical Encounters requires great coordination. The zookeepers need to make sure that they walk gingerly around some plants, and also the horticulturists work together with our zookeepers to ensure that when they're pruning, they don't disrupt nesting birds or places where birds prefer to perch. But this shows a great way that we work in collaboration together. Tropical Encounters has so much to see, but some of my favorite things are actually the plants here. We have a wonderful collection of bromeliads, and bromeliads are remarkable for so many reasons, but one of the reasons I like bromeliads is that they provide little homes for a myriad of other species because of their little pools that are in between their bracts of their leaves, including some of my very favorite animals on earth, poison dart frogs. Now, I'm very excited to talk to you about something that your generosity has made possible. We're very excited to bring back a beloved species here in Tropical Encounter, the leafcutter ant. Well, what I have in my hand is a replica clearly much bigger than what leafcutter ants are actually sized at. They're a very small ant, but ants are amazing animals found throughout the world. But the leafcutter ant is something special. And I'm very happy to talk a little bit about what makes leafcutter ants special. They are a species from Central and South America. And what's really interesting about them is that they actually have domesticated their own food millions of years ago. And this species is an animal that farms its own food, and their food is a type of a fungus. And what leafcutter ants do is they go out to the rainforest in large groups, following a line, following smells and vibrations of others, and they find rainforest plants that suit their tastes, and they chew off little pieces of leaves in which they carry in their mandibles and then walk all the way back The size of the leaf could be like 20 times the size of the ant. They have incredible strength, but they take these pieces of leaves and they go down into a burrow and they go and place these leaves in these gardens that they tend. And what's really remarkable is that these gardens of this fungus is grown exclusively to feed their babies. And so to tend this garden, the leaves themselves aren't eaten by the ants. The leaves are mulched and put into a compost that the fungus eats and develops, and then they feed the little parts of the fungus that grow to the little larvae ants. Now, occasionally the adult ants will eat a little bit of the fungus itself, but they mostly eat rainforest saps from different trees. What's interesting also about leafcutter ants is how their reproduction. They're a remarkable animal, and that when occasionally there are the right conditions in the rainforest, that there'll be something called a nuptial flight, in which both male and female winged ants come out at night and they fly high up in the air and they fly around, and a female will mate with several males and have up to like 30 million sperm in her. She will fall to the ground as the males will. The males will then die, and this female will lose her wings, crawl down a hole, and hopefully start a colony with the little bit of fungus that she brought with her from her natal colony. And from that, she starts laying eggs and growing bigger and bigger. And those first group of eggs are all females, and those little female ants tend to take care of what's now the queen, and they make sure that that fungus is growing well by going out and cutting little pieces of leaf. And throughout time, they're able to grow that colony up to about 8 million individuals. So leafcutter ants are very much like human beings in creating these remarkably complex societies. And they are really important in rainforests. That leafcutter ants are known as architects of the rainforest because they're able to kind of change vegetation patterns and open up new areas for new plants to grow. So they're helpful for the diversity of rainforests. But I just think they're remarkable animals. They live life in a super colony, which in some ways is almost kind of like they're one organism, all 8 million strong. Really incredible animals, and we're excited because of your generosity to be able to bring them back to St. Paul at the Como Park Zoo. Behind me is an exhibit that features both the nesting areas for where the fungus is grown. The conditions have to be just right, both in terms of cleanliness. The ants will take away the various parts that are rotting to keep the fungal gardens clean. And then the other part of the exhibit is a really important part, and that is the foraging chamber just over my shoulder to the left. That is where we daily put different types of vegetation that the ants go and cut out little pieces of the leaves to then feed to the fungal culture. So leafcutter ants are just remarkable animals, and we're excited to bring them back to Como Park Zoo. Now I'd like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Dr. Lisa Philander.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Dr. Lisa Philander. I am the horticultural curator of the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory. And I want to piggyback off of what Jeff was talking about in terms of insects. And many of you may not know this, but controlling pests, insect pests under glass in a conservatory setting is really difficult. And all people who grow in greenhouses have to use pesticides, or else we can use beneficial insects. And what this method is called is integrated pest management. And so one of the things that was graciously funded by Como Friends Group was an integrated pest management system, which we will be tracking on a new app. exactly what pests we have, what beneficial pests that we've released, and also the amount of chemicals that we've used. And so one of the things about growing under glass is that, you know, the bad insects, the tinier pests get in, and those are the things that eat the plants, but the larger pests that would eat the tiny pests don't get to go in. So what we'll do is we'll release those here, and that's part of this 3-year project that we will be using in the integrated pest management plan. And hopefully this will provide better insect control for our plants, especially in this room where we don't use any pesticides at all. And finally, this will hopefully be much more helpful in reducing our pesticide applications for the health of our staff. So we are thrilled to have that. As you know, we are in this neotropical environment, and basically the biodiversity of tropical biomes is 2/3 of the plants on Earth are living in these spaces. One of the things that occurs in tropical biome areas or tropical locations is that there's obviously a lot of rain, and there's a constant temperature that's in between 70 and 80 degrees. So it's really warm, really humid, a lot of rain. And one of the consequences of this is that the soils become really poor, and part of that is anything that dies and any leaf that fall into the ground are almost immediately degraded and kind of sucked up by the plants. And so when you have an environment like this where you're replicating sort of nature in an indoor setting, a problem that isn't really foreseen or that happens on the zoo side is that the plants get really big and they will be sucking the nutrients out of the soil, and then they tend to outgrow the space that they're in. And so part of what we are so thrilled to have funded this year is that we will be replacing the soils here, because all the trees which have grown really large are now, they've taken the nutrients out of the soil, and this depletes the soil down. So we want to refill the soil kind of back up to the levels that it should be at. And as a result of this, we're going to be covering up a lot of the roots of, and in some cases, some of the trunks of the trees. And then the trees won't like, and so we're going to have to replace some trees. Some of the trees are growing out of their spaces, and so we would like to replace them. This is really commonplace in an indoor conservatory setting where you kind of need to have a succession plan for, like, after so many years, the trees are outgrown the space and we need to replace them. And so this plan is to replace a lot of the soil and the larger tree specimens, and finding some new and interesting, cool things to talk to you and show you about. And so it's been one of the pleasures that I have of working here at Como is collaborating with the zoo team, and my favorite part of Como Park Zoo and Conservatory is Chloe, the sloth, and every day that I can, I come over and visit her, and I think she knows who I am now. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Dave Kennan. I'm the owner of Bright Wines. I'm also on the committee for Bouquets, the event we're at this evening, through Como Friends. I've been coordinating the wines for this event for a number of years now, using many of my preferred suppliers. We have stations of wine throughout the conservatory, staffed by the vendors for the wines in question, including here in the Sunken Garden. So we're going to give you a little tour this evening of the wine stations we have at the Bouquets event for 2023. So beginning in the Sunken Garden, where you can see the winter flower show is in full bloom, it looks wonderful in here. It smells wonderful in here. We'll have a wine station in here, which will surely be one of the most popular of the evening. Actually, tonight's wines for the station and wines in here are kind of interesting themselves. They're from Greece and from South Africa. Why those two countries? Well, it's kind of fun to take a tour, perhaps of the Mediterranean, or a tour of someplace down under when we're here in Minnesota's winter. But I've also chosen the wines for each of the stations throughout the conservatory for a particular reason. And when I mentioned how wonderful it smells in here, well, that's one of the reasons why we chose to use the wines from South Africa and from Greece. those wines will actually be kind of crisp and vivacious and bright styles of wines. That's typical of those wine countries, wine regions, and wine styles. And so we thought that would be a nice way to kind of cut through the warmth and aromas and beauty that's in here, give us a little bit of counterpoint, and let the wines stand out as the flowers certainly are. So this evening's wines in the Sunken Garden will be from the wine company, and there'll be selections mainly from South Africa and from Greece. As we head out into the main conservatory, into the Palm Dome, there'll be a station of wines in the historic entrance. The wines in there, to kind of give us a counterpoint to what we've had in here, will be full of big, full-bodied, rich, mainly West Coast wines. The New France Wine Company will be there. They will have some selections from around the world, but their highlight wines will probably be some big and brawny types of California wines to give us something different than what we had here in the Sunken Garden. We will continue on through into the Ordway wing. We'll have a couple of wine tables in there. One of the wine stations will be all Italian. That'll be Domace Vino's wines, and all of those Italian wines will be from their company. I wanted to highlight a few wines this evening, and so one of the wines I want to mention as we get going here is an Italian wine. So this is a 100% Old Vines Montepulciano from a single vineyard called the Piancarda. So if you're going to be at the event this evening, look for this wine at one of the tables. Continuing on in the Ordway wing, we will also have a table of wines that is all from Australia and a couple of Japanese shochu. So this wine here is an example of the wines that will be at that station, in fact. This is a single vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from Coonawarra district in South Australia. The wines at that station will be handled by the Winebow Company of Wines, and that wine vendor will have all all Australia, as well as those two Japanese shochu. And I told him to bring 3. Hopefully he does that, because there's 3 distinct styles he can show off that way. So look for those. Getting back into the main area of the conservatory, we'll also have wines at a station in the Fern Room. And those wines there will be from Rue 38. And one of the highlights of the entire evening will be there, because Rue 38 will be serving us a bottle of very nice Bordeaux. One of the best wines of the evening, frankly. This is called Chateau Arnauld. It's a Cru Bourgeois from the Haut-Médoc region of Bordeaux. It's the left bank, therefore, mainly Cabernet Sauvignon. And in fact, one of the wine magazines that reviewed this wine highly said it was a candidate for wine of the vintage. And that wine will be available for tasting in the Fern Room. Hopefully it's not too moist in there this evening. Continuing on through, we'll also have a wine station in the exhibit hall that connects the visitor center and the historic conservatory here. Those wines there will be interesting because they're all going to be from one winery. The winery is called Piatelli. The company is called Vinacopia. Piatelli is the winery from Mendoza, Argentina, that actually has some Minnesota ownership. So there's a Minnesota owner to the ownership of the winery. There's a Minnesota-based importer for the wines, Minnesota-based wholesaler for the wines, and that's who's here this evening. And we're going to be tasting through a selection of limited edition wines, older vintages, small production, limited edition wines that are not normally available. So that's kind of an exciting table for this evening. We'll also have wines in the main visitor center. There'll be Postus Wine Company. We'll have a table full of wines, including some new selections from California there as well, including a Chardonnay called Juggernaut that's being introduced to the Twin Cities market by way of this event here. Juggernaut has a Cabernet Sauvignon you may know. It's from the winery called Bogle that makes a wine called Phantom. They also have a line of wines called Juggernaut with very impressive heavy bottles. I wish I had one here to show you, but the wine is so new, we don't have the sample bottle just yet. They'll be bringing it in for us to taste though, and that is a Chardonnay from California. We'll have a table of wines in the gift shop, and that's where I'll be. So anyone who's looking to find Dave from Bright Wines, I'll be in the gift shop most of the evening. I'll be answering questions about what wines are where, which highlight wines are in which spots, but I'll also be serving a couple of things while I'm there as well. Another one of the highlight wines, in fact, of the whole evening is going to be at the table I'll be at, which is, speaking of Argentina, this is a Malbec from Mendoza, Argentina. It's a little different, a little bit higher end than the Piatelli ones that are in the exhibit hall. This one is a very rare example, and it's a mature wine as well. So this is going to be one of the highlight wines we can have if you stop by the gift shop. Another thing at the gift shop that I'll be talking about is I'm bringing along a non-alcoholic wine. I've got a sparkling Brut that is made from Riesling in Germany. It's a dry, fully sparkling wine that has been de-alcoholized. And we'll be able to talk about that there. So if anyone needs something to refresh their palate that isn't more wine, you can have a glass of that. We'll also be having wines in the Tropical encounters. Bouquets Imports will have a station of wine in the tropical encounters. They'll be warm there all evening long. They'll do their best to keep their whites chilled and their reds serving temperature. We'll have some very nice wines in that room, including some new wines from around the world. A new Italian example. We'll have a Pinot Noir in that room. So those are some nice wines that Bouquets Imports will have. If you go upstairs into the auditorium, there's going to be a couple of interesting things up there. There's going to be a wine station up there that has all French wines from the Rhone Valley, mainly for the Rhones. And that company is called Lompian Wines. They're based here in St. Paul, Minnesota. They import wines directly, and they have some wonderful wines from the south of France. They'll be serving at that table. We'll also have a table of mead up there. There's a meadery, I should say, called Bumbling Fools, based out of Oakdale, Minnesota, that will have a table full of 8 different selections of honey wine or mead that you can try. So all told, throughout the conservatory, we have 10 different tables of wine sprinkled throughout. We've got highlights from around the world. We've got California wines like the I Love It Zinfandel, which is, they call it Tievely, but that's I Love It spelled backwards. That will be at the table in the Ordway wing. We've got the Australians. We've got the Malbecs. We've got the limited edition wines. We have wines from France, Bordeaux. We have wines from Italy. So a little bit of everything for everyone. It's impossible to have every wine from every corner of the world. And like I said, here in the Sunken Garden, you have a chance to try wines from Greece and from South Africa. And how often do you get to do that in a gorgeous setting here in the middle of a Minnesota winter?
Wow. Thanks, Dave, Lisa, and Jeff, for sharing your wisdom and your insights about wine, about Como, and about leafcutter ants. Who knew? And also thanks to all of our partners who have supported this event. And thanks to you for tuning in tonight. Please remember to consider making a fund admission gift. And if you're tuning in before 9 p.m. on Thursday, February 23rd, don't forget to check out that auction. Thanks so much and have a great evening.